Me avisa cuando está listo. Okay, count 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. ברוכים הבאים, ברוכות הבאות, תזכו לשנים רבות, נעימות וטובות. The following film that you're going to watch is being recorded today in Panama as a alternative for me being able to share with you this great event, our third year of Aneni Live. Not always what I plan happens, because God is in charge and He decides where a person should be every day. And today I got a great lesson right at the beginning of the year of how Borei Olam runs the world and not us. I came out to Panama on Thursday for a series of classes and a beautiful seminar that Baruch Hashem we had the merit to do, and had plans to fly to Miami, the short flight this afternoon, to join as advertised the Aneni event. But obviously Borei Olam had a different plan for reasons that I don't know, nor will I try to explain. And He canceled my flight. So here I am, sharing the night with you, virtually, but my heart is really there. We read in the Torah, Shuvah Yisrael ad Hashem Elokecha ki chashalta ba'avonecha. And the Gemara in Masechet Yuma asks, Shuvah Yisrael, return to God. And when you return to God, not only can you return, but it's ad Hashem Elokecha. You can get all the way up, right up to Kisei HaKavod, till God's throne Himself. But why are you needed to return that way? What did you do wrong that we have to use the term return? Ki chashalta, you had a mechshol, a mistake. Ba'avonecha, in a sin. And the Gemara asks, a mechshol seems to be more to the side of a avera b'shogeg. And an avon seems to be more to the side of an avera b'meizid. Don't these two contradict? Deliberately sinning or accidentally sinning? They're two different areas of sin, they're not the same. And the Gemara uses in two segments a very famous rule. That when one does teshuvah, meyirah, out of fear of God, he walks into the synagogue on the eve of Yom Kippur, trembling, petrified. God runs the world and I need a good year and I'm in trouble because I don't know what last year was like. He's great. He's accomplishing something. But he's accomplishing zdonotav. His averot b'meizid become shgagot, averot b'shogeg. We reduce the level of an offense, almost like a plea bargain today, from a much higher level offense down to a lower level offense. But an offense, it still stays. But when one comes into the synagogue and does teshuvah me'ahava, he comes and he prays to Borei Olam out of love. And he says, God, I love you. I'm your child. You're my father. It is true that throughout the year I may have made mistakes, but they weren't intentional. It wasn't to spite. It was just out of my yetzer hara that confused me, maybe even on a daily basis. Borei Olam tells him back, you're coming to me with love. A father loves his son unconditionally. And not only will I wipe out your sins and give you a clean slate, but you'll get a bonus. And that bonus will be that your averot that you did b'meizid, purposely, that you knew that you were sinning and you sinned anyway, nehefachim lo, will convert and become zechuyot, merits of mitzvot. And I thought to myself, based on the teachings of the great Rabbi Sanegoram Shel Yisrael, our greatest advocate in heaven, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Mibarditchev, Zchuto Yagen Aleinu, he should pray for us every day in heaven and stick up for Am Yisrael by the throne of God. That when a Jew walks into the synagogue on the eve of Kippur and we're about to begin Kol Nidre, we start off by saying B'yeshiva shel mala u b'yeshiva shel mata, based on the knowledge of the heavenly courts and the earthly courts, God and lahavdil mankind, anu matirim lihitpalel im ha'avaryanim. We are agreeing willingly. We're not forced to. Nothing makes us do it. It's by choice that we agree to pray together with the avaryan, the criminal. I would expect that on the eve of Yom Kippur, when we're going into God to plead for mercy and to secure a happy and healthy, successful new year for ourselves, our loved ones, and the entire Am Yisrael, that we would present the case of all the tzaddikim in the room, all the righteous people, all the great acts of kindness and good deeds that are joining forces in one mission, one nation under God. But instead, the first mention, right at the beginning of the holiday, is the avaryan, the criminal, the lowest of the low. And the Barditchever Rebbe once explained that being that a person who enters a synagogue is doing teshuvah me'ahava, he's repenting out of love, because nobody forced him to be there. He chose to come in. He could have been anywhere else. He could have even opted the middle road and said, I'm going to do teshuvah, but I'll do it at my house. Why do I have to go to the synagogue for? And willingly, wholeheartedly, many times at the cost of money, he buys a seat in the synagogue and sits down on the eve of Kippur to pray. His teshuvah is so great that it goes up to the heavenly thrones, and zdonotav nehafachim lo l'schuyot. His sins convert immediately to merits. And being that he's an avaryan, his sins are so great that when they become mitzvot on the same level, on that great caliber. And suddenly he goes instantly from being a meruchak, as the Rambam writes, from being somebody so far, to somebody who's so close, to somebody who's right there under the kiseh hakavod, to somebody who Borei Olam with pride says, B'ni b'chori Yisrael, you're my child, and not just any child, my oldest child that I love. And all of that is accomplished, yesh koneh olamo b'sha'a achat, in a moment of teshuvah. What can we do practically to make sure that when we cross the threshold of the synagogue and walk inside on the eve of Kippur, we too will be doing teshuvah me'ahava, and we too will secure that we tip the scale on the positive side. When we study the Rambam in Minchot Shuvah, and we see the way he explains the balance of mitzvot and avirot, the scale that God has in heaven, what we've all learned in preschool, the Rambam doesn't use the term mitzvah and avera, but instead of using the term mitzvah, he goes ahead and uses the term zechuyot, merits, against chovot, the sins that we've done. Why doesn't he just use the simple term that's used all over the Torah of mitzvot? Wouldn't that be more conventional? And he avoids it straight throughout Hilchot Teshuvah. And he constantly repeats the term of zechuyot, of the merits that we have. To understand this, we'll quote a very famous story from the great Hasidic master Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. The rabbi once had a student who came into, and he said, Rebbe, I'm stuck in great tzarot, I have great problems, very big struggles in my life. And the rabbi turns to him and says, my son, what is it that's bothering you? What are your struggles in life? And he tells the rabbi, I have 3 daughters. They're all of marriageable age. They're all righteous tzidkaniyot, great girls, and they have everything working for them, except for one sad fact, that their father is poor. I can't even scrape the money together to feed them normal meals. Definitely not to pay for a wedding, to support a son-in-law, a Talmid Chacham, out of the question. But they want to marry Talmidei Chachamim. They want to marry righteous people. And I want to see them do well and have an easy life. And I have to be able to provide for them. But Rebbe, I'm broke. I got nothing. What do I do? And the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh turns to this person. And he tells him, I'm going to give you advice. I'll give you practical advice. And he says, what? He said, how much money do you own? And the guy shyly looks at the rabbi and he says, almost nothing. He said, I didn't ask you to give me a general term. I asked you to be specific. Tell me how much money you currently have in your house. Now I'm going to break this down into our American terms. He turns to the rabbi and he says, I have $10. And the rabbi says, that's it? And he says, yes. He says, go home. Get your $10. Stick them into your pocket. Take a journey to the marketplace of the city where the wholesalers sell their stock to the retailers that are in business. And the first offer of anything you can possibly buy with $10, immediately buy. And from that, you'll become a wealthy man. And the student looks at the Baal Shem Tov in shock. And he almost wants to challenge. It's on the tip of his tongue to say, Rebbe, $10? How do I become wealthy? Is this some sort of lottery idea? All you need is $1 and a dream. But he has emunat chachamim, true faith in the great leader. And he goes. He comes home, he takes his last $10 that otherwise probably would have been used for dinner for his children. And he goes into the marketplace. And there he begins walking around looking for what to buy. But these are wholesalers. They sell everything strictly in bulk. There's nothing that he can buy. He's stuck. And like this, he goes from booth to booth. Will anybody sell me stock for $10? And they ask him, what do you want to buy? And he says, anything. And they mock him away. Until finally a couple of Jews that sadly were pretty far away from the right way see this guy and they come over to him. And they decide to make a laughing stock out of him. And they tell him, Jew, what is it that you're looking to buy? And he says, anything, I don't care what. And one guy arrogantly tells him, sir, I got an idea for you. Give me the $10 and I will sell you my Olam Haba. I will sell you my portion in the world to come. And remembering the words of his rabbi that the first thing that's offered to him for $10, he quickly tells the guy, sure, here you go. And he hands in the $10 bill. They take out a piece of paper and they write a contract that this guy is selling his Olam Haba for $10 to the buyer, the student of the Baal Shem Tov. He goes home. His wife is there waiting by the door and says, "Nu, did the rabbi's blessing work? Did you come back with money? Are you a wealthy man? Can we finally see light at the end of this tunnel and marry off our daughters?" And he says, "I did what the rabbi said. So show me the money." And he pulls out a piece of paper that he bought somebody's Olam Haba. And his wife looks at him and says, "Was this person at least a tzaddik?" He says, "Definitely not. No tzaddik would sell his Olam Haba." And as the guy is listening to his wife sob, he asks her, "Why are you crying?" And she says, "This was my last hope. And even this is gone. You spend $10 on nothing, on Olam Haba that doesn't exist. What are we going to do now? We don't even have money for food." Simultaneously, this Jew that just sold his Olam Haba goes home after a long workday, comes into his house, and excitingly shares with his wife his humorous story of the day. "I met some Orthodox rabbi, a student of the Baal Shem Tov, and he's so naive, so dumb, so stupid. For $10, which was his only $10 that he owned, he was willing to give it to me because I told him I'll sell him my portion in paradise." And there he's making fun of paradise and of the rabbi that bought his portion. His wife turns to him with a very serious, stern face. And she says, "My dear husband, it is true that I may love you, and it's true that we're married, and we may even have a great marriage. But I married a Jew. And the rabbis teach us, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek la'olam haba. Every Jew has a portion in Olam Haba. And if you were willing to give that up, whether it was seriously or for a prank, at the cost of $10, you're not a Jew." and I'm not staying married to you. And the guy looks at his wife and he says, come on, we don't believe in this stuff. What are you saying? And she puts her foot down and says, you either go get that piece of paper back and bring it to me, or you find somewhere else to sleep tonight. He goes running back to the student's house. He locates him and he says, sir, you know what we did earlier was a joke. Give me back the piece of paper, I'll give you back your $10. And at that point, the student of the Baal Shem Tov tells him, there's no way in the world that I'm giving you back the paper. This was no joke. I have a signed contract. I meant this very seriously. And I didn't even do it in my own mind. I did it based on the advice my rabbi gave me. This was a very thought out move. I'll give you 100. No. I'll give you 1,000. No. I'll give you 10,000. My marriage is on the line. And the guy looks back at him and says, even if you were to give me all the money in the world, the paper is mine. Helplessly, he runs into the room of the Baal Shem Tov. He bursts out crying and he says, Rebbe, you have to help me. You have a student who's a crook. You got to save me from the guy. A guy was in the marketplace today and bought my Olam Haba for $10. I didn't know what I was doing. I made a mistake. I offered him 100 times the money to give it back. He didn't agree. I offered him 1,000 times the money to give it back. He still didn't agree. I need that paper back. Rabbi, you got to help me. And the rabbi turns to the guy and says, according to the halakha, he doesn't have to give it to you back. There's no reason for it. But if you want a favor from me, as a rabbi, to step over my boundaries of authority and convince him to be kind and do you the favor of giving you the paper back, you have to make a commitment that you will marry off his 3 daughters and pay everything in full. And only after the gentleman agreed and gave the commitment to the great rabbi, the rabbi calls the student in and says, hand him his paper back. Our prayers were answered. You have money to marry off your daughters. The guy looks at the rabbi in disbelief. But again, Emunat Chachamim kicks in and he hands over the paper to this Jew, who runs back to his wife and shows him the paper and stays married. But then, there alone, in 4 eyes with the rabbi, he tells him, Rabbi, I don't understand. Was this some sort of slandering? Was this some sort of blackmail strategy to get money out of somebody? That's not money I want. Second of all, Rabbi, let's be honest, this guy never did anything good in his life, to the point that he made fun of everything. And if that's the case, his Olam Haba is not worth all this money that he just committed to. So I sold him something at an unfair price. It's not the market value. How is this all okay? And the Baal Shem Tov turns to his student and teaches him a great lesson in life. You want to know how much is the value of the mitzvah that you do? As much as you value it. You want to know how great your Olam Haba is going to be? As much as you want it. As much as it's worth to you. To break it down into our terms, if somebody was to buy an IPO today at a couple of dollars a share, and 5 years later it was suddenly worth a few $100s a share, would we say he did something wrong? Definitely not. The value of the stock went up. And the Baal Shem Tov explains him and he says, when this guy sold you his Olam Haba, you actually got the bad end of the deal. It wasn't even worth $10, because to him it wasn't worth anything. But when for whatever reason he was willing to pay so much money to get it back, at that point he elevated the value of his portion in paradise. And he made it worth many millions instead. And he actually paid a very cheap price to get it back. When we come to Borei Olam on the eve of Yom Kippur, what we really try and accomplish is telling him, God, we love you. And we love you so much that the last thing we would want to do is disappoint you. And we feel terrible that throughout the year we disappointed you. But God, you should know, when we look back at our year, all the pleasure we had from sin is worthless to us. And the proof is, if today somebody would come to us and say, sell me the pleasure that you had in the bar 2 nights ago, We would laugh at it. We'd say there's nothing to sell. It's gone. It's over. But the few good deeds that we did, even if they were far and beyond, those are things that we cherish dearly. We would never give up on them. And at any price in the world, we wouldn't sell the merit of a mitzvah. That's something that we keep to ourselves. And at that point, the Rambam kicks in and says, you do teshuvah me'ahava. Your mitzvot don't become greater. You only did whatever amount of mitzvot. But by process of elimination, you reduce the value of sin to zero, so they're non-existent. And by process of elimination, you raise the value of the few mitzvot you did do to priceless. And that's why he doesn't use the term mitzvot, but rather the term zichuyot. The merits, the value of the deeds that we do become worth so much more. And that's enough to tip the scale for us and for the whole Jewish nation. But right after Yom Kippur, God's going to test us. He's going to test us in the synagogue in the morning when we're in the middle of Chazarat Hashatz and our phone rings. One of the clients that we were waiting for him to call us back on a sale for a few days finally called. And there he's going to test, is the mitzvah of Amen of Chazarat Hashatz more important than a business transaction? Or is the business transaction more important? He's going to hold us to what we preached on the eve of Yom Kippur. He's going to check and see what's worth more. He's going to see every Monday night, do we opt to come to this great synagogue, to be with the great Chachamim, led by my dearest friend, Rabbi Galamidi Yishmereu Ha'el, together with his family and the whole Kahal Kadosh, to study an hour of Torah consistently as we've been doing, thank God, for a few years? Or is anything else more important? There's Monday Night Football. It's the same time as the shiur. I got to watch the game. And there he's going to see if we were true to our word. My dearest friends, I don't turn to you as a rabbi. I'm no greater than any of you. Probably you're all much greater than I am in every way. I turn to you as a brother to a brother and a sister. Let's show God on the eve of Kippur that to us a mitzvah is priceless. It's worth it all. And sins, as many as we may have, were just dumb mistakes, and they're really worthless. And by accomplishing that, we will build in Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba castles, palaces, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu La'anchil Shai Olamot. God is going to give 310 worlds to each and every tzaddik. And as the Rambam teaches us in Hilchot Teshuvah, by doing Teshuvah Me'ahava, yesterday we could have been so far away, but today we can go from an avaryan to a level of a tzaddik gamur. And in that merit, God will say, Shuvah Yisrael, welcome home. Ki chashalta, you might have averot b'shogeg. Ba'avonecha, you may have averot b'mezid. But in my eyes, they're all mitzvot and blessings. May Borei Olam shower His love on us and give us a happy and healthy and successful year, together with the entire Am Yisrael. And a very special thought and prayer for the soldiers, these young kids in Israel, that are fighting our wars every day, that are sitting on the front lines of the battlefields, especially in these times where the global politics don't look in our favor that much. And we all see how we need God's mercy to protect these kids. And may God bring them all home to their mothers that are sitting up at night crying, worried about their children, happy, healthy, and safe. And together with the whole Am Yisrael, as a nation, one nation under God, may we learn to love each other and love all of mankind, because we are all God's creation. And together, we can join force to say, Dai l'tzarotenu, enough of the problems. And we want the redemption in our times through happiness and protection. Tizku l'shanim rabot, ne'imot v'tovot.